Alison Bannister, who is a career coach and author. Alison, thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about the case study, we're going to talk about the case study questions, and Alison's going to answer the questions that you've submitted in advance by email. Thanks for joining us, Alison, again. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you got into career coaching.
Thanks ever so much indeed for having me. It's great to be here. I started off career coaching back in 1987. I actually started in recruitment then, and I've been assisting individuals find employment for about, it's actually over 30 years now. I keep saying nearly 30 years, but it's over 30 years now, and I love it. I work with youth, I work with mature age candidates, I work with return to work mums, and a fantastic cross-section of the community. I've worked with disability employment as well. And so, I thought it's about time that I combine all of my knowledge and wisdom, if I may say that. And I started my own career coaching business 2.5 years ago, because I think some people were getting missed out there. So, I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Brilliant. And you're also an author.
I am. And so, oh look, I've just got a copy of my book handy here. And it is called Get Your Rear into Gear, Job Searching Tips for Career Success. And I wrote this as a tool for young people, in particular, actually, and return to work mums, to use it as a tool so as they can get their highlighter out, because it's packed with 60 really simple, straightforward tips on how to secure employment, but to actually excel that journey, to get into work faster, to drive your career. So I wrote it for my 50th birthday this year, so as I could share my knowledge with the world.
Excellent. And I have had a look through the book, and there are some amazing tips. I particularly like the LinkedIn one, but all of the tips are really useful. So definitely it's great to share that wisdom and to give people that opportunity to work through it at their own pace. So I can't wait to actually put that book out there and start sharing that with other teachers as well. So in your role, in the case study, you go out to libraries and you offer a service to many people who usually they fall short of accessing the government support, and you provide this additional funded support in libraries, and it's a bit like a ticket system, and they get support with their resume. Is that correct?
That's right. I do twofold, actually. I've partnered with 15 local governments across Western Australia. A lot of what I do is actually workshops. So I actually go in and conduct a workshop, and that I get paid as a facilitator to do that. But I base my business model that the participants could come free of charge because they're job seekers. And as a result, I don't want to set up a business model whereby people who were unemployed were having to pay for a service. So that was the reason I actually marketed my business particularly towards local government. So I go in and do workshops, 2-hour face-to-face workshops, like building a LinkedIn profile, job searching tips and tricks, becoming a mumpreneur, and I do a lot in the youth space as well. But the other side is I've actually started a passion project, which is I work with the local government for resume clinics. We've named them resume clinics, where anybody who, like you say, has kind of slipped through the net, they can't access Centrelink benefits because maybe their parents earn too much or their partner earns too much, but they need a little bit of career guidance or direction. And at the end of the day, with a resume, it's your number one introduction to an employer. And as a result, if you get it wrong, unfortunately, an employer doesn't get to see the best of you. And it's really such an important document. Your cover letter and your resume is your first introduction to an employer. So it has to try to aim to meet the employer's expectations. So what I actually do is we set up a system whereby people come in and it's like take a ticket. So when you go to Coles or Woolies, people come in and they take a ticket and they get 15 minutes with me, and I literally grab my highlighter pen. Usually I've got one on my desk. and I highlight areas that I feel as if they could improve upon, and then I give them suggestions about where they can find help and free resources after our session, because there are actually free career advisors out there. The Jobs and Skills Centre is a fantastic resource. It started about the same time as I did, funny enough, and I send people along to that all the time because they have free resume courses there. And I don't know whether many people know about it, but they run them literally monthly, and also employability skills courses. So yeah, so I try and share as much free information with the public, because you don't know what you don't know.
No, absolutely. And this was the case that the whole case of you don't know what you don't know is exactly what happened with John in the case study. So John's actually a real person that you met, isn't he?
He is a real person. And I say this with a glint in my eye. I guess one thing I should be very straightforward about, I am a very positive, upbeat person, but I do take job seeking very seriously, because I know it can make the difference between somebody putting food on the table, providing for their family, or going with or without. So, but I try to be as engaging as possible, because people remember the information when you have a bit of fun with them and give them that positive approach. And they just need a little bit of extra confidence. That's the key. But when John came in, he was a gentleman that came in and he was completely fed up. He was really demotivated. And I think I was the kind of last straw. And so he thought he'd come in and take a ticket and give it a whirl. And so we sat down, and I can honestly say this hand on heart, it was the worst resume I've ever seen. And I've been doing this, like I say, for 30 plus years. And I thought, right, give me the resume. I thought, I can't let him leave the premises without me giving him some extra hope and help. So I took the opportunity and actually did rewrite his resume for him. And I can't do that for everybody, but this guy definitely needed it. So I did that at home, because in the resume, unfortunately, there was a lot of negative language towards his previous employer, and he was communicating negative experiences that he'd had with previous employers, which unfortunately a new employer doesn't want to hear about. They're not interested. They want to know how you're going to bring value to their business, how you're going to be the solution to the problem, how you're going to help and elevate their service and enhance their service, rather than potentially coming across as a bit of a pain in the bum. And that was a really, really big issue. And I could see that straight away, because he was literally complaining about his ex-colleagues, which I'd never seen on a resume before. But if somebody hadn't, he was so very skilled at what he did. He was a property developer, a qualified carpenter. He'd started businesses. He was an entrepreneur. You know, he had a great deal of skills, but he hadn't communicated it effectively on the resume because he didn't know how to. So yeah, we've addressed that pretty quickly, and I communicated with him in a very genteel way that there were better ways of positioning his resume. I was choosing my words quite carefully after picking myself up off the floor.
And as you said, you ended up writing him a resume because you realised that he'd pretty much lost all hope. But with the 15 minutes in the appointment, as well as doing that extra that you did, what can you do within those 15 minutes that you have? What steps can you take to support John?
Initially, it's identifying or showing somebody what simple templates are available and out there that they can use. I've seen resumes of up to 10 pages sometimes. And recruiters and hiring managers are very time poor. So one thing I say is keep your resume very short and to the point, succinct, 2 pages and 10 years maximum of work history. Obviously with young people, the difference is they have to build up that kind of experience. So that's one of the first things that I actually share. Keep it succinct. The other thing I do say, if the fire alarm went off now, immediately, if you remember nothing else about when we meet, proofread, proofread, and proofread again. Get somebody you trust. It might be a teacher, a librarian, a parent, a friend that has got, a good command of the English language. Get them to proofread your resume. Because when starting my business a couple of years ago, I actually did a survey of 50 different kinds of employers, because I thought I knew the answers to most things, but I thought I don't want to just tell people as an authority. I want to share my experiences from speaking with human resources managers, recruitment officers, team leaders, supervisors, construction managers, people in the hospitality industry. And their number one issue, or when declining a resume as opposed to shortlisting a candidate for potential moving forward to an interview, is errors throughout the resume. So it doesn't matter how qualified you are, how knowledgeable you are, or how experienced you are, if your resume is littered with errors, it can potentially prevent you from progressing to the next stage. And with regard to John, that was a big issue as well. It wasn't just the negative language, but it was littered with errors as well. But that wasn't his forte. His forte was being a property developer. But you don't know what you don't know. And that information is so valuable. So in my book, actually, that's the number one tip out of everything. Proofread, proofread, and proofread again.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying absolutely.
Fantastic. And the other thing is, there's a lot of, you can go to places like Seek and Career One that's actually out there. A great resource for young people is something called Job Jumpstart. I don't know whether your participants are familiar with Job Jumpstart, but when I go into community workshops, I always share the information with them because it's absolutely brilliant. Young people can download one-page tip sheets on writing a resume, on job searching strategies, on how to network. So they're going to become more independent job seekers. I've taken it upon myself to help people become independent job seekers, which means sharing knowledge so as they have the invisible tools to go out and replicate what I've told them, because they can do it for themselves. They don't need to have somebody do it for them. They just need to learn the basics. So the resume, for example, is a part of what I call my foundation documents, the resume and the cover letter, and a basic LinkedIn profile as well. Even though it's not a document, it is actually up there now that, in a lot of fields, LinkedIn, there's 590 million users of it. And there's a reason it's used across 200 countries, because networking works. And so.
Absolutely. It's very important, isn't it? And, going back to John, the negative language that John used, we obviously realised that he's lost hope, and he talked a lot about his previous employers in a very negative way, and the colleagues that he used to work with. What factors do you feel contributed to the negative language that he used?
When he was actually describing one particular project that he'd worked on, it was overseas, and he had to use local labour to complete a construction project. And because they weren't used to, the local labour weren't used to working, because employment wasn't a really big thing in the area, he described them as lazy, which is really a huge no-no. Because whatever you put in a resume, if you're giving negative language in the resume, it actually gives a negative impression to the employer about you. It says more about you as a person than it does the person that you're actually speaking about. So that was one of the main issues. And then he actually worked for a previous employer, and he was being disrespectful about the partners, the way they disagreed on particular issues, so nothing could ever get done. Once again, whilst we've all probably had bosses that might irritate us, or maybe couldn't, the office manager couldn't agree with the operations manager, regardless of the outcome, it's certainly not something that you might want to consider putting inside of your resume. So therefore, I turned that language around, removed it immediately, and just explained the value that he could bring, the size of the projects that he worked on, how successful the project was, the outcome. So we focus on the outcome, the achievement, the results, the accomplishments, what was accomplished. And even if you work as in a part-time role at IGA, there will still be accomplishments that you achieve. It may be commended for your great manners or your fantastic customer service skills. It may be that you you've been recommended to work extra hours because of your strong work ethic. Young people have got lots of transferable skills from school, and therefore they can actually weave those into their resume. But it's just about highlighting what are their strengths. And that's also one of my number one tips, I would say, is I ask all of my young people, especially, but anybody, to write down your strengths. What are your strengths? What are you good at? What do you like to do? What makes you happy when you do it? Because that is particularly one of your strengths. If you enjoy doing it, you'll bring extra value because you might work an extra 5 minutes over of an evening or in the morning to get the job completed or to get the job done. An employer recognizes that extra value that you're going to bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really answers our third question, actually, about how, in terms of the value that you need to add, how did you actually get that from John? So obviously, you know the value that employers are seeking, but with somebody like John, who has got very frustrated, he's very downbeat, he's very negative, how do you get from him the value that he can offer? How do you get that from him?
I think it's very much about confidence. And people, when they lose self-confidence because they've applied for so many jobs and have become very demotivated and disheartened, sometimes they just need a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel to say, you will be successful. I believe in you. And that's what I told John. I said, once we have your resume up to scratch, so as you are being able to stand out from the crowd and communicate your value and show how you actually completed a project on time, in budget, and whereby your employers are really happy. Once we put that in there, I explained to him that I recognized his skills, I recognized his worth, and a future employer would as well. But we just have to draw that out of him. So once I told him that I believed he had the skills to be successful, the change in somebody's personality is incredible. It's astounding. Sometimes it's almost like just putting an olive branch out to say, I have belief in you. I just need you to trust me and believe in me, because once you follow these basic instructions, which is identifying your skills, writing them down, because you know that you have got lots of skills to offer, but you just need to find out what support networks are out there available to help you. And then we build your employer wish list. Who do you want to work for? What job do you want to do? Why do you want to do that job? So then I asked him a few of those questions. So then I would actually write into the resume some of that information, as in, so he's an accomplished property developer with 20 plus years experience across 3 continents. All of a sudden, it elevates his platform. It elevates his status. Now, I know for young people that isn't necessarily something that you can communicate as simply as that, but there are things with students that they will have accomplished, whether it is taking part or organising sporting activities or family events. It might be helping organise, their mum's 40th party or 50th party. There are project skills involved with that, budgeting, accounts, all of these amazing things build up to that. So eventually, with John, I actually managed to give him a little bit of extra confidence simply by saying, I believe in you. I recognise you've got great skills. We just have to demonstrate to an employer, this is the value that you are going to bring them. And so, would you like me to say the end of that story yet or not?
We'll just do the fourth question, and then we'll hear whether or not how he succeeded and if he ended up with the job he wanted. So, and the final question is, what in terms of the next step? So, getting him on the so sending him with a better resume, communicating to give an employer that informed choice. Once he's actually got onto a shortlist, what additional support and training will John need then to guide him through the rest of the selection process?
For him, it was very much just understanding how to write maybe a cover letter as well, because your resume is very important, but your cover letter is an opportunity to actually write a little bit extra value, the extra value that you can offer to the employer. And so I gave him some tips on where to find some great cover letters. And even if with my mature candidates, I even tell them to go to Job Jumpstart. I say we're all young at heart. I don't care if you're 40, 50 or 60, because the information is still applicable. It's still relevant. So and they actually have a 7-page exercise in there on how to write a cover letter.
Brilliant.
That students could do today. I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, and interviews?
Yeah, absolutely. There's information in there on interviews, job searching strategies, resume writing, and I've got so many pieces of information to share with your participants that they can then use after today, because I love sharing this knowledge. And even more exciting than that, Microsoft Office have actually got some exceptional free skills for all job seekers, even if you're employed, that can elevate their journey as well and actually help them to learn. There's a 2-hour video training course on how to write a resume.
Brilliant. That's so, and for some students that hate reading, that's an amazing resource to be able to watch a video, because then you get the whole visual and the instructions through it as well.
Absolutely. And it also has a separate video on how to network.
Perfect.
To elevate your job searching journey, and also how to, I think it's also got how to write a cover letter in there as well, but don't quote me on that one just in case, but definitely job searching strategies, networking, and they have interview preparation questions, 26 questions and answers on how to better perform an interview. And this is available from Microsoft. And I'm going to say it's really easy to remember. If anybody wants to Google Microsoft Digital Skills Job Seeker, just those words. So Microsoft Digital Skills Job Seeker, it comes up straight away. And there are hours of certified courses in there, even how to become an IT help desk person, all available until 2021, March 2021, since COVID.
Amazing. That's so helpful, isn't it? Absolutely perfect. And, I guess from when you started in the 80s to now, you must have seen so many changes.
Just even the way employers connect with employees now is so very different. I used to handwrite boards and put them outside of my recruitment agency or stick adverts in the window. Now I discuss what a talent pool is and what a passive job seeker is. And Because a passive job seeker is a person who's in a job, for example, that isn't actively looking, but they might be tempted in 6 or 12 months' time. There are EOIs these days where employers advertise expressions of interest, which is when a employer might think they have tendered for a project and it could come off in the next few months. So they're going to man up for that project or get people in their talent pipeline ready to go. So that's especially for things like in the mining industry, they're always kind of manning up for projects. So EOIs are really valuable. Setting up job alerts on the internet. We had one computer in the physics department in 1987. And so now we have Google. Research is key for all job seekers, especially young people. Find out, I say to all my students, find out as much about the employer as possible. Look at their vision, look at their values. Where are they headed? What product do they offer? What service do they provide? And then see how you can align your skills to that, because then you can start practicing how you're going to communicate that to them when you get to interview, because they will get to interview. I tell them all, practice equals development.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good advice. And that's actually the end of our case study questions, but I'm really excited to say that 2 teachers have responded and sent in questions, which means that these 2 teachers get a copy of your book, complimentary copy of your book. This is what we put in our newsletter for Monday. So well done to teachers who have submitted the questions. And the first question is, we've talked a little bit about being competitive, and you have mentioned about some of the skills and some of the things that young people do. But with such a small resume, how do young people stand out and be competitive when there's so many resumes that are potentially being looked at for jobs? What is it that they can do that makes them stand out straight away?
The first thing I would say is actually writing at the top of their resume something called, I call it an elevator pitch, and for the purposes of this discussion, we'll call it an elevator pitch. If I'm writing a resume for somebody else, I'll either call it their professional profile or their profile, or some call it their career objective, which is 2 or 3 lines about who they are. For example, an experienced customer service individual who has 2 years cash handling or banking experience or stock control or warehousing or whatever it might be, aiming for, and then explaining a little bit about their aspiration. So where are they headed? Aiming to work with a team of like-minded individuals, or aiming to work with an innovative employer. So a little bit about who they are, what value they can bring, and what their aspirations are. So that's the elevator pitch. What the individual is going to do for the organisation, but where does that person, where are they headed? Because there was a scientific study that was completed, and it can take sometimes less than 90 seconds for a hiring manager or recruiter to read a resume, which is like, which is bad news. So what we have to do is create that sensational headline that's going to grab their attention really quickly, so as they are enticed to read on further about that individual. And that often is the thing that will catch their eye, and they will feel like they actually do want to read more and learn more about that candidate. So creating a very enticing elevator pitch. I say to my young students, think about your sensational headline. Your resume is your billboard. What is your sensational headline? And they do exercises on it. They write out things that they can actually create to put in their elevator pitch. So I hope that's answered that one.
That's perfect. And what one little spin-off question from that one is, would you recommend that the elevator pitch is adapted slightly for each different job that you're going for, so that you can show your strengths in relation to that particular job? Or would you say keep your elevator pitch as your pitch?
Absolutely. A good resume, once you've actually got the basics of it done and written out in chronological order, with key skills in there, it should only take about 10 or 15 minutes to tweak it for each position that you're applying for, which is not a lot of time in a young person's life for the value that they could potentially achieve. So that they've got everything to gain. So yes, I would say tweaking that elevator pitch, again, researching the employer, find out what's important to the employer and show how you align to those values or where their service is headed.
Yeah, excellent. And the final question that was submitted is, obviously you've got your covering letter, but so many jobs now ask you to submit by email. So what should what can a candidate or a job applicant put in an email when they're applying for a job? I'm assuming that they would attach their full covering letter, but what actually goes in the email itself?
The email itself, I've been writing cover letter emails for many, many years, and I would say short, sweet, to the point. Mm-hmm. Addressing the recruiter's name wherever possible, so identifying the name of the person, the recruiter, the hiring manager, and actually addressing it as per their advert. So if the advert actually says contact Jenny McCarthy, you can write Dear Jenny. But the subject line is super important, because with an email, if you have been asked to email information, be very clear. Sometimes there is a set of instructions on the advert, and it's the first test of whether people can follow an instruction correctly. So they can actually write in the subject line what it's regarding. Now, if somebody has specified what should go into that subject line, please ensure that high attention to detail is placed on that piece of information, because that can make the difference between you having your resume or your application considered or not. If I may give you one really quick example, I actually worked with a candidate based over in Sydney. There was a job advertised on LinkedIn. At the bottom of that advertisement, there was a specific instruction saying, please apply via email and include the numbers 333 in the subject line. Many applicants applied via LinkedIn. As a result, their applications were not considered.
Wow.
The second test, or the second part of that test by the employer, was the individual had to put the numbers 333 in the subject line to show they could demonstrate high attention to detail, because the job was for a graphic designer and they had to follow the client's brief and the client's instruction. If they couldn't listen and comprehend or pay attention to what the client was telling them, how could they expect to actually win the account effectively or do the work properly? So therefore, if the 333 was not included in the subject line, once again, their application would not have been considered.
That's so interesting, isn't it? You're being tested for your job before you've even started.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is just, they're two kind of really basic things, but also you can keep the email slightly more informal, but it's still an opportunity for you to make it easy for the recruiter or employer to reach out to you. So please ask your young participants to include a call to action, which is you write, Dear Jenny, please find attached my resume for the above role. And I've detailed a few points below as to why I believe I could add value to your organisation. And you put 4 or 5 bullet points. and then kindly contact me on this telephone number, as I would be delighted to meet you to discuss this opportunity further.
Brilliant. That's such a perfect email, and it's such a good way for you know, it's a simple structure that can be assessed quite nicely, so students can attempt this and teachers can say, have they put the subject line in? They could even use that little test for the students as well, which would be really interesting, and I'd love to see the outcome from that and how many students actually follow those instructions. And also the 5 bullet points and a call to action. It's just very nice checklist, basic assessment, which is fantastic. And I really value your time today and sharing all of your expertise. But before we finish the discussion, I'd love to share with our teachers, you know, what the next steps are, and you know, how can they get support? Is there any support that you offer to teachers in any way?
Absolutely. So for anyone that wants to get in touch with me, my email address is info@Alison, which is ALISON, Bannister with 2 N's, BANNISTER, info@AlisonBannister.com. Or give me a call. I'm quite happy to put my phone number out there. It's on everything that I do. It's 0488 048 448. And I'm going to be going into some schools and actually holding workshops, and I'm doing author talks. So to combine as much information as possible for kind of year 11, year 12 students and discussing job searching tips. And I'm combining all of these sets of information. So if you'd like to reach out to me, I would love to come along and meet your participants in your community and see if I can help further.
Perfect. That's amazing. And that has actually come to the end of our discussion now. So thank you again so much for sharing your insights. And before, just one last thing before we go, your book, is it available on Amazon? Can teachers get hold of it?
It is available immediately on Amazon or directly from myself. So please feel free to get in touch at info@AlisonBannister.com, or go straight to my website, AlisonBannister.com. And yeah, you can grab one of those. I have to share one tiny last bit of information about John, if I may. Am I allowed?
Oh, we didn't find out, did we? Sorry, how did you get on?
So exciting. So after 12 months of not hearing from any employers, in the first week of applying for several jobs, he got 3 positive responses. He received 1 call for an interview, and he actually wrote to me 6 weeks later to say, I'm just sitting at the airport about to fly out for my new job in mining. Thank you for that fantastic resume. So that was a great result.
That is fabulous, and that's so good. It's such a that's probably partly why you do what you do.
It's the main reason that gets me up in the morning, because I absolutely love doing what I do. I'm very passionate, and it's so amazing to see the great fortunes, how people's lives can change simply from learning a few basic details. You don't know what you don't know, and I've got so much information that I'd love to share. And yeah, if anyone wants to email me afterwards, I'll be happy to send them a list of helpful websites in Australia that you can use today, and also the Microsoft link as well. I'll be more than happy to throw that in today.
Amazing. That's so awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been delightful. I really, really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much indeed.